So it is very important.
Lights, camera.
You are live.
I'd like to call to order the April 26, 2023 version of the Isle of Palms Planning Commission and acknowledge that the press and the public were duly notified in accordance with state law. First item on our agenda is the approval of our minutes from our meeting of March 8, 2023. Any comments or motions?
Move to accept.
We have a motion. Motion and a second to accept. Any comments? Bearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. First order of new business. Discussion of the task from City Council regarding short-term rentals. So, Mr. Douglas.
Yes.
Or Mr. Matt.
I'll take this. So unfortunately, I put this at the back of your packet. I apologize for that, but it's page 96 of your packet. And there was a, as you all were aware, there was a process through City Council where City Council gathered input through various community meetings, public hearings, series of meetings. And they ultimately decided not to implement a cap. There were a few items that came out of those discussions that were clearly in their wheelhouse in terms of new policy. Policy, another part of it is staffing, and associated with the staffing is a funding component. So council is dealing with kind of their list of items to incorporate that we can go through, but also through that process came their request to the Planning Commission to look at other things to consider in terms of policy, and these are really items that would be potentially rolled into the city zoning code and or parking code, and they'd be in one of those two sections of the code. So in your pack,
Occupancy.
yeah, that would be in the zoning code. So specifically, and I guess I would just say at this initial meeting, wanted to put the ideas and the list that's been created so far before you all. See if there were items that you would like to be added to the list, and this is just to kind of, we've done this a number of times in previous years, where you guys kind of brainstorm, come up with a list. We typically then transition to a pros and cons analysis of the items on that list, and then you will go through the list and come up with a recommendation for how to proceed. So that's how I would envision we move this forward. Create the list, create the pros and cons of each, and then come up with an ultimate recommendation. That recommendation would go back to City Council for their consideration, and then they obviously would be the ones making judgment as to whether or not to enact a new code or policy. So first item on the list that we have so far is limit occupancy of newly constructed or substantially reconstructed homes. So for a little bit of backstory here, the way the city code currently works is if you build a new home and there has never been a license for that property, that new home's occupancy is limited to 12 people overnight, 12 overnight, 24 during the day. If that property has ever had a rental or actually not ever, if it had a license in 2010, which is when they created that ordinance, the occupancy for the new home gets grandfathered to what the occupancy of the prior home was. So for an example, somebody has an existing rental house, that rental house allows 24 people to be an occupancy of 24 people. the owner tears that house down, they rebuild a brand-new house, that brand-new house has an occupancy of 24 and not 12. I'll just tell you that, that occasionally comes up in the eyes of community members where they will see a new house being built and they, in their mind, have heard, any new house is limited to an occupancy of 12. They will then be shocked when our department issues a rental license for whatever the occupancy of the prior house is. So, that does get noticed. It gets, there's inquiries about it when it does happen. Don't know how maybe that happens 2, 3, 4 times a year, something like that, that a new house gets built and it has a grandfathered occupancy. But that's the first item on the list to be discussed. And I don't know if you want to go through these just as a list, or if you want to talk about them as we go through them. I'm good either way. Ron, do you have a?
I think just go through them quickly,
Okay.
and then we can come back.
Require minimum night stay. This one, the Planning Commission has analyzed before. The idea here is that currently there is no, you could rent a house for a day. I don't know how often that happens, but you could right now, and it wouldn't violate any code. I think the thought here is that when a group shows up for a day, they're a little more fired up for action. They may be more inclined to cause issues. It's probably not a family showing up for a vacation. It's probably a group assembling for a night, and there could be more potential for some kind of activity that generates a complaint to a neighbor. So again, that's been considered before. We can talk about that. Kind of idea would be a 3-night minimum. Next item, and I will tell you from my standpoint, the parking has always been a little bit of a double-edged sword, and the request here is that you all consider looking or you analyze the idea of amending the parking requirements to incentivize less vehicles and more carpooling. I think that is always, the idea of less cars has always been enticing and something that the community would like to see. I think it would just take a creative solution to figure out how to truly do that. And the issue, as I've seen it with the cars historically, is, and currently, I guess to tell you kind of the existing groundwork, currently there is a limit on the number of cars that can be on a property overnight. And I want to say it's from 11 p.m. to 9 a.m. There's a limit, and it's derived from a formula from the limit of occupants. But when that limit is in effect, it can have the what I would say undesired effect of just shifting cars from on a property to some public parking space. So in other words, you're limited to 6 cars, but you have 10 cars trying to stay at that property. They could maintain their compliance by leaving 6 cars overnight and then shifting the other 4 cars into the public right-of-way on Palm Boulevard, and that would be compliant. So, it's a little bit of a pick your poison. Would you rather that the property hold all 10 cars, or is that better where they come and they go off the property? I guess, the idea here is, in the perfect world, they just wouldn't bring 10 cars. They would bring fewer cars, so hence the suggestion that we look at ways to reduce the number of cars coming to the property in the first place. Next one, require short-term listings to include their license number in their advertisements. This is one we've also talked about in the past. and we can talk about this, but we now do have a software that's identifying properties that are being rented. So if we know they're being rented, seeing their number there doesn't really change anything. The software is telling us it's being rented. So I know that other communities do this, and I think it's kind of a little bit of a feel-good situation where a resident looking at Airbnb can see, okay, this is a properly licensed house, and it may reduce a phone call to my office or an inquiry with my office of, is this legal? They could actually put proof in their listing that it has been vetted and it is legal. So again, that's one that we've kind of talked about in the past. Last one is on the list, and this is taken from Charleston County. The way they handle short-term rentals is similar to the way the city handles home occupations, whereby each home occupation, and the request here is that consider each rental goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special exception. So the onus would be kind of put on the Board of Zoning Appeals to look at certain criteria, and I guess the challenge here would be there would have to be criteria incorporated in this requirement for the board to consider. You know, just kind of thinking out loud, there could be something like, you know, you minimize the number on a road in a neighborhood, and that the Board of Zoning Appeals is kind of keeping track with their approvals at various houses. Can tell you from an administrative standpoint, and Matt and I handling those, that board, I think it would be, you know, currently they have 2-3 cases a month. This would obviously balloon that workload. You know, right now we think we have 1,700 rental licenses. So, you know, you would at least have this initial process of getting all of those through the Board of Zoning Appeals. So not that would keep us from doing it, but it certainly would be something the staff would have to consider as to how that would operationally, how we would get through that number of requests. So that's what's on the list so far. Again, if there's other ideas, you know, I would encourage any other ideas to be added to the list for consideration. Be happy to answer any questions about any one of those.
Could we, seems like one of the easier ones to perhaps address would be the license and marketing and advertising. Many municipalities require it throughout the country.
Yep.
It's you know, if it's a feel-good thing, I guess we, you know, talk about it. I don't have any objection to moving forward with that.
You're talking about number 6, the license number?
Yeah.
Yeah, and your marketing. Yeah, so however you market as an owner, or you use one of the portals, Airbnb, VRBO, or you just have your own website for your property, you just simply have to show your license number.
Well, yeah, my thought on that is, I mean, this is maybe showing my ignorance, but I don't know, to put the number on there maybe seems a little invasive, but what about a compliance statement? Would that be satisfactory? And would that check the box? Like, to just put a statement on your advertisement that you have a license with the City of Isle of Palms? I mean, what's the intention of putting the actual number on there that somebody, man on the street's gonna be able to query it somewhere online?
Yeah, and that's not, yeah, I think they
So-
could get, I'll tell you what I think you're right. I think it would give your neighbor, if you were to choose to rent your house, it would give them some kind of assurance that it's been properly licensed. You still don't really know for certain until you call us if that's a legitimate license number.
There you go.
As long as I got
that-
10 digits. and
That
you're
tells-
not- And you're not checking.
That tells me
Yeah.
all I need to know, yeah.
So I guess my thoughts on this one would be, for me to reach out to our compliance, provider, that the service that we use. And I will say that they have in their, kind of in their things that they can look for, that is a box, because I think it's common that a lot of,
Searchable field.
yeah, it's a field that they can look for and that they can actually report back that, yes, we see it and it does indeed align. I was a little bit curious as to whether or not they are using that information in their, because they do a little bit of magic of taking the listings, which do not include the address, and they are attaching those listings to our list of licensed properties, and they're saying, okay, this listing is this license, they're putting them together. I don't know that them having access to the license number in a photo would allow them to say, okay, we now see that this is actually that property, and it lines up on the back end. I think it'd probably be worth an inquiry to them if it helps at all. If it doesn't help them, I don't know that there's any real meaningful help that it does, other than, again, kind of the appearance of compliance.
That
Maybe
sounds,
nothing more than appearance of, which, I mean, your statement would be kind of the same thing. It's
right.
an
If
appearance.
it's, yeah, so if it's helpful to the software management company, then sure, I'm for it. But if it's not, then I don't really see, I mean, I would think a statement of compliance would be,
Just as helpful, just as
Meaningful.
meaningful.
Because you could always call.
Does everybody understand that a listing for rent, 123 Umpty Ump Street, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, it's on multiple sites potentially. It's not
Yeah.
just on a single site. You know, so the software that the city has subscribed to must go out and search and compare the listings to know that, you know, where they are.
This is a duplicate, yeah, this is where it
And
is.
it's duplicated, so they don't
Yep.
count it multiple times. Because these listings are all over.
so it sounds like they're,
It's like an infinite number of portals you can put your home for rent on.
so that's,
Right.
so it's more dependent on the address then. It's, if everything,
And we don't, and
Comes
some
back
of
to-
them.
And some of them
don't have
Well, let me
addresses.
explain another little nuance. Most of them won't allow you to put in your listing 123 Umpty Ump Street, because then you're going to search 123 Umpty Ump Street is owned by Douglas Carr and Isle of Palms, and they're gonna send you a letter, I wanna rent your house, and cut out the commission to
And
Right,
whoever
right.
the provider is. So very few have addresses unless it's a management company lists the address, because we want you at our site, at our properties, not going to the portals and renting through somebody, a third party, that has to be paid an additional.
But don't those portals circumvent or wheel back around to the actual property manager? That's a
Oh,
question.
absolutely.
So
I've
like if I'm on
listed multiple
VRBO,
sites.
yes.
But you can't find me to contact me about 123 Umpty Ump Street on VRBO until after you have inquired.
Okay.
And if you inquire, my software is open to VRBO, so they can search, much like there's a searching, to see that you rented 123 Umpty Ump Street, and you first went in, they know you went in and
Right.
looked at it VRBO. So then they rented it through Island Realty, but Island Realty now has to pay because you rented it. We have to pay VRBO. It's, yeah.
Well, not if I use different IP addresses. If I use different IP addresses, it's a little tough.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work.
but most people just go and find their property and rent it.
I don't know enough about the licensing, posting it on there. nobody seems to be taken aback by it unless you can get personal information off of it.
Nobody seems to mind posting the,
Right, unless you can
I mean-
get personal information off of it.
yeah, you know, we do kind of try to be respectful of people's personal information. We are required to be respectful of their financial information in the licensing department. But at the same time, anything other than financial information is public information. So
Right.
we pretty freely distribute lists of all the rentals of, so I would say that anybody who is curious about the rental next door is kind of has access to pretty much anything in our system except for that financial information. We don't give social security numbers, but
Gross rent, tax paid, that sort of
Correct.
thing.
Can I go to the financial information? I'm jumping around a little bit. Number 2. Copy of the Schedule E, Form 1040.
Yes.
Verify gross. And require this C Form 1040 for a regular business license. Most people who rent through property management, all of that's reported through your property management company, and your ATAX money gets paid.
Well, they get a 1099 for the
Right.
gross rent.
They do. So, for anybody who uses a property management company, I don't see that this is even necessary. But if you don't use a property management company, and say you're renting on your own, you need to verify some of this stuff and verify that your ATAX money has been paid. Does that make sense? Are you following me?
yeah, yes. So I can tell you one of our, and I will just, I guess, preface this by saying that's already work that the staff has been tasked with by city council, so you all are not being asked to
Okay.
consider it as a recommendation because it's already been pretty much put on to our table, on our plate to do. But part of our challenge is being able to reconcile that this property has paid all of their accommodations taxes. We see through a property manager, we see kind of a mass payment, but we don't get it down to the granular unit number. And then we do not get access to if they've rented outside of their manager, which we know that happens, where some rentals happen through the manager, some rentals happen not through the manager. So
Right.
we have it's very hard for us to look at all the reporting and put it all together. So we would like to put the onus of that accounting back onto the owner. Of you need to show us your gross receipts, and then you need to show us that for your gross receipts, all of your accommodations were accounted for either through your property manager or you directly paying for any rentals that did not go through your manager. So we're trying to put,
For the time it's rented, not for the time it's marked out for, say,
That's
maintenance
correct.
and.
correct.
Okay.
I'm not a tax person, but I think you started on the income tax
I started on
documents,
that.
and then you went to the accommodations.
Well, all of that's kind of done together. You leave that up to the property management company. So here's
Well,
your
not-
gross. And then based upon that and your night's stay, like, they will send the ATAX money for you. It's not
Yeah.
something you have to do on the back end. But they have to match up to the records.
Right.
We're-
We're not, currently, and part of what the city council did was to hire basically an additional person to cross-check all of these at the time of application. Right now, they're coming in, they're dealing with,
You have renewals.
they're dealing with whatever it is, 1,700 renewals in addition to several thousand just regular licenses. So there's not the time, the staff kind of resource needed to be able to kind of look at each one in great detail. And part of that solution is to hire an additional person to start doing that.
So,
Your
Yeah.
concern, though, if I heard you correctly, is and it really isn't of concern, because the gross rent is reported by the management companies, and the appropriate accommodations tax is sent along with that report each month to county and the state, as it's necessary for those fees. Where you're probably going to have issue is on,
Back.
Joe Blow's 123
Right.
Elm
Right.
Street
who doesn't have a property?
tells you that, yeah, I rented $6,000 worth of rent, and I paid my 14.5% to the state for all the different taxes I am due. Here's my accommodations tax account, and here's a copy of my rental receipts or the tax, I forget what the form is, E-form, or whatever it is, where you have the property listed on your federal and state.
Schedule E, right?
So Schedule E.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all, I don't know what else you get other than
Those
an
are gonna be the
individual's
hardest.
Schedule E and their accommodations tax account verification.
Yeah, we do not believe that all of that is adding up currently, that the gross receipts are matching accommodations tax being paid, rental license fees being paid. So we want to put basically an additional check into that to kind of tighten that up. We believe that there's the ability, and we think that it probably does happen, for people to underreport.
Sure.
Well, it is. It's very much an honor system, and I don't know how you drill down to get anything other than what is reported by an individual.
You could actually, this is one of the thoughts that was bouncing around, was if you're 4% and you're gone, and you choose to rent your house out while you're gone, you almost need an agent or somebody should something happen. If you are out of the country, something goes wrong at your house, you almost should sign with a property management company.
Well, so you do, the code does require that you have a 24-hour agent available. Just does not have to be a professional property manager, but it has to be, it's really a a local point of contact that can be on scene within an hour.
I'm aware of that. I just think you could take it one step further. For people who are traveling and don't want to rent their house out, that's fine. But people who want to rent their house out to a third party under a 4% tax base, it would be worth considering.
So are you wanting to add to the list, consider requiring a property manager?
If
For every
they
rental?
are, yes, I would say if they are in excess of 1,000 miles away for an extended period of time, it would help the city, it would help our law enforcement.
And yet they haven't had but one in many, many, many years where that was a problem.
I know,
And he wasn't 1,000 miles away, he was in Charlotte.
Yeah.
I mean,
I just think it'd be tough to
but you're
regulate
also
that.
trying
I mean,
to.
How are you gonna keep people from lying?
But you're also trying to get that gross and the accommodation tax tied to it as well, and that's what you guys do.
Yes.
It's
Well,
just a thought.
The accommodations tax, you're going through it, is like, so y'all pay, the management company pays the accommodations tax and gives
We
the,
collect it
Mm-hmm.
and then
and pay it to the state,
Correct.
and then give a receipt back to the owner of what went into the state, I guess?
So, no, we don't. We report the gross rent on a 1099. We report the gross rent on the business license. We don't get anything back that said, well, 12 Umpty Ump Street had 10,000 in rent, so they obviously paid $1,440.50, whatever the math works out to be. That isn't there. And you were alluding to that earlier. You don't know really what the management companies are paying. The assumption is that we are all
Some do.
legitimately putting it forward that way.
And I don't think for every manager, we are getting a granular list of, I think you, I hate to make you an example, but I think your company sends one check for all of the accounts, and I think that you have a list, and I think that the collection agencies have a list of what's being accounted for in that check. I don't think that's always getting, that list, that granular list is always getting back to the city. We're not collecting it, so
Well,
we're,
the state or the state doesn't send you I mean, that's a big mystery in terms of how much went to the state.
Right.
Or it's shared with counties that don't get accommodations tax, for instance.
Right.
So it's not a dollar for dollar return back to the Isle of Palms for what's collected on the Isle of Palms.
right.
We're a donor community, big time. So I don't know how you get that, how you drill down to that. And I don't think you're concerned so much as with the management company as it is to the owner of 123 Umptium Street. That's the one where he's just gonna tell you, I did $6,000 in rent. There's my Schedule E, it shows $6,000. Here's my accommodations account, whatever the math works out
Right.
to, my $200 in taxes, that I paid it. Let me have my license. What do you do?
Yeah, right now, we're not doing that even.
Well, let's say you did, but what do you do? If he got 60,000, how do you,
It's hard to
how do you, how do you, short of knocking on the door every time there's a car in the driveway, how much did you pay in rent?
I think that's the trouble with several of these items on the list, is how do you regulate?
Well, it absolutely is, but.
Amy, can I put my screen up there? Do you know how to do that?
Yes.
So just for, in this,
And we're not even tasked with this, and we're conversing about it, but,
so this is Rentalscape. This is the software that we're using to track
yes.
properties. And I hope there's not any,
Careful.
So it's gross rent and dollars per night, and, yeah, so you get a calendar so you can do some extrapolation
It's only in the room.
based on the nightly rate.
thank you.
Yeah.
So we are getting bits and pieces, and this is being extrapolated from the bookings that go gray. They can kind of tell, they can kind of put together when it got booked, when it got blocked out. We're getting kind of what we think is a good estimate of income. We're getting, as it was mentioned, most of them are advertising on multiple different sites. So this is showing that this property has 3 current live listings. So it's putting all of the information together for this property and giving us kind of it's adding it up for us. So it's doing some of that work in the background.
So, yeah, I don't think you would catch people doing small, but that are grossly misreporting, you'd probably catch it through your software.
Yeah, so and even this graph here is new for us, and this has already been very helpful in that. We know it's not down to the penny, but if we are getting something that's grossly
Somebody's reporting
different-
6,000 and that's
And we
showing
look-
you 60, you would know,
We find that. We're finding that now, but
That's
that's,
the cost of an elevator, so,
yeah.
that's fairly recent that we're at least getting to that level of kind of, it's not of verifying revenue, but it's giving us.
So what happens when that reservation cancels?
They say they catch that.
Okay. But
They say
in the
that-
meantime, somebody's gotten $9,300, canceled it into the booking. I'm just, I know people in the business.
get insurance.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to,
And we,
fortunately, most people aren't that devious, but I do see it from time to time with owners.
Oh, no, I've known people who've had renters in and they have canceled, but they have rental insurance, which compensates them for that week loss. Of course, you don't need any expenses tied to that, like housekeeping or whatever, but that's just to cover the bookings.
No, that's good information. So you're getting a good feel for what the reality at the end of the year will be on that particular property right there.
Put it
It'll
all
add
together.
up, and when they submit there, you'll compare to X to Y and
Right.
have an idea.
right, we're closer than we used to be. I mean, it's not
Right.
completely kind of shooting in the dark, and it's not a complete honor system, but somewhere, right here, you'll see, this is something that we mentioned, there's the line for STR license displayed, none. So it's something that if this
Right.
group wanted to, they're already kind of used to looking for it and checking for it. And I've made a note to reach out to them and just ask, is that helpful to them in putting this together? I have to think that their challenge in doing this work are these condo units where to me, they all look identical.
The flip side of the short-term rental license, the good part of it, is you can always track all the multiple numbers through one rental license. Like, it's posted, so you're not trying to always match up.
Right. That
From
is,
your
I
standpoint.
think if there's any benefit to posting the number, that might be it for these people on the back end, where they're able to kind of be more confident in their assessment of, these are giving addresses, but if you look at the listings,
Yeah, a lot of them don't give addresses, so.
I don't think any,
Which
in my
I-
experience, none of them do.
None
not-
of them
none of
do, it's approximate locations and it's the descriptions and.
Within 100 yards.
Yeah, and so you can kind of guess if you know the area. But until you click book it now, and put in your financial information, you may not know the exact address till you get a confirmation. Unless you're working with, the managers on their websites, it's readily available. You know what you're booking. It's the VRBO, Airbnb, Booking.com, yeah, those.
So
kinds of
on
things.
your site, you do put the addresses? You do?
Yep, 123 Elm Street's all over the place. The Wojciechowskis go there every year.
And they want to know the,
Boy,
So-
I'm really in trouble now.
Right?
I was kind of thinking, ideally you'd require them to have the address, but going back to your point, there's valid reasons why you wouldn't actually want to put the address. So that goes back to, well, the STR license kind of at least gives the city an ability to track the address.
Right.
All right. I'm a
I just
believer.
worry
So
about
Put
it
it
from
on
data
there.
mining.
I'm all
That's
for
it.
it.
let me ask if it helps. They may say it does no good, we'll come back, so we'll
Yeah,
talk
if it-
about that.
There you go.
But then you can start tracking those that don't. They have a license for, what, a few weeks, 17 weeks, is that it?
Those that don't what?
People who travel and rent their house out at a 4% tax base. They would have
Yeah,
to
this
have-
is,
They would have to have that,
they would have to have what?
a rental license.
Yes, they
Mhm.
would. And you rent a night, you have to have a rental
Right.
license. So just while we're on this, I'm gonna just watch the screen there for property details. Just so you all know, have it in the back of your mind, the information that it's capturing. So you obviously see that if we go down the columns, that's TMS number. The next one is our license number. The next one's really about listing, but then it won't all fit on the same screen. But we get obviously the owner's name, mailing address, listing, host information. Those icons are the various sites. Oh, those are the those are the titles on the sites. This gives us information about how long it's been listed. A lot of them you see go back, they've been showing up for many years. Rental type, minimum night stay, so we talked a little bit about if we wanted to regulate that, this group could be searching for that and validating that they're advertising correctly.
Well, while you're on that one, I'm all in favor of restricting the number of nights for a minimum rental.
Okay.
That probably will eliminate all the partying on Palm Boulevard. He's not gonna rent it for one night. So if you're gonna do anything that's gonna help, that would be wonderful.
So from a financial aspect, most people, it doesn't cost them to rent, depending upon the size of the house, for 3 nights. It's 4 nights and then full on in the summertime. Some of your smaller units, like you were talking about, the condos, they would probably turn a decent profit if they rented 2 nights. So it is something to consider if you want to control the activity on Front Beach, to limit that.
Well, I think that'd be a good start.
I think that you'll find that there's nobody renting a house, an owner or a management company, for one night.
I've seen
Well, I thought
I've
that-
seen large
What
houses.
has.
I've seen large houses for 3 nights.
What
and I don't,
happens is, well, 3 nights is different than 1 night.
3 nights you
But
don't turn a profit.
somebody, that house on 420th, the one where that party was.
Yep.
I believe that was a 3-night minimum, and they paid the fee, but they were only there 1 night.
That you can't stop. but-
No, yeah, exactly.
Well, then you should make it a minimum of 4 nights and let them pay more for 1 night.
They destroyed that house. There's no amount of money was worth that one.
Well, they destroyed a lot of stuff. I mean, just the bottom line is if we can help our police officers maintain some decency in our island by increasing the length of time you need to rent a house for, at least you eliminate some of the bottom feeders.
I think the concept is good with all these again, just, and practically, how do you regulate these things? I think it's difficult, that's the question, and you're gonna have to really drill down in the details and dice this thing up with a microscope.
Only time anybody's gonna get caught is if there's a problem with the property.
There you go.
Quite frankly.
Yeah, all these
And
things
then
are
it
just,
didn't even work, because there's a problem with the property.
That's right.
So,
Well, this.
You
I
mean you
mean-
don't drive by every day and check on your properties?
I drive by a lot of them, I don't check on them.
That is at least a field that could be, our service could be looking for it, be verifying to us that it's being advertised that way with a minimum night stay. I guess the calendar only works if as a host, you say no less than 3 nights. I don't think it'll allow you to even go beyond the calendar of trying to book it for less than 3 nights. Sandy,
We have
what?
hotels. I'm
what-
sorry, go ahead.
I remember talking about this before and kind of I thought it was your feeling that it would really hurt in the shoulder months of kind of bridge run weekend. When kids are not out for school, that it would hurt owners that just want to do a weekend. Am I remembering that correctly? Or
Yeah, about
you-
9 months out of the year, if you will, the shoulder season, where people rent shorter terms. We are at a 3-night minimum for all of our homes. I think the one exception might be Sea Cabins, we do it at 2 night, just as an example. I don't know that we do any of the, I have to double check. I don't believe we do any of the condos in Wild Dunes for anything less than 3 nights.
So in your mind, would 3 nights not be too onerous for a rental owner? To
On the
to
shoulder
have
season.
it be at least
So now you're.
3 nights?
Yeah, I think in homes, if you're excluding the condominiums. Over, I can't speak for the commercial district over here with the condotels, and what they do, and I do believe they are 1 nights, a lot of those.
Yeah, they pretty much operate like a hotel room, I think.
Yes. So,
So maybe that would be,
Single-family residences.
yeah,
Yeah.
written that way, that if it's a single-family home, it would have to be 3 nights or more.
So we keep referring, but I guess if we're applying this across the board, we're not talking, it goes back to the people that live in their home and only rent it out a couple of times a year, not being able to rent it out a weekend, or potentially.
No, we're
So,
talking
Is that
about,
feasible?
well, that's,
well, we're talking
well,
3.
if I want to rent my home out because I'm gonna be gone and
You're gonna be gone for 3
And
days,
make a
and you're
couple-
gonna go through the bother of getting your house ready to rent it for 3
because
days.
I'm not paying a maid service, I'm not paying all that other stuff, is
Yeah.
somebody comes, stays in my house and pays me a couple $100. I mean, so that to me would be kind of, I guess, again, the downside. I'm not saying that I'm against it just because of that, but I think the main people that we would be hurting by doing a minimum cap are the people that are residents that want to rent their house out without going through a rental company.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So you're saying 3 nights is too restrictive?
yes. He's saying that would be,
Potentially for again, for the people that are, we'll call them the 4% owners.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is if they're only doing it few times a year for weekends, they still have to have someone who's designated as a managed property manager.
That could be their neighbor, though.
yeah, it doesn't have to be
There's people
professionally
that have their
managed.
You gotta
neighbors.
pack your
I know.
put it somewhere.
It's,
Yeah.
I
So,
understand
David,
what you're saying.
Yeah, right, like I said, and it's only a handful of people that you're affecting, but that's,
It's
to me,
it's almost 200 4%ers have licenses right now.
Right, like I said, and a lot of those probably wouldn't rent it out for less than,
They wouldn't.
So David, I guess the counter to that position would be, it's those rentals that are there for 1 night or 2 nights that are causing problems. I don't know if there's any data to back that up, or I guess the idea would be that they have the potential to cause more problems because they're only showing up for a night and they're gonna blow it out.
right.
That would be, I guess that would be the counter point to that
No, I agree, I see but it's at 2 different extremes. You're talking about the larger houses that rent it out for a party for 1 night, as opposed to a resident that rents it out to a small family for 1 night to make some extra money. And,
Well, the larger houses, they'll rent for 4 nights, but they'll stay for 1.
well, right, and we're not,
they're
putting a
paying
cap's
for
not
it.
gonna stop that.
Exactly. There you go. What,
Thank
is it
you.
going to achieve that expected
What's
results?
Exactly.
It's gonna hurt the small guy, and it's probably not really gonna deter anybody who has ill intentions.
Well, the small guy who's only renting out a couple times a year isn't gonna have a license anyway.
he should.
Probably not.
He should and he will now.
Yeah.
I mean,
If they market and have a website,
Right.
but if it's just word of mouth, hey, Joe, come on
Oh, yeah.
down, you and Sally and the
That
family
could-
can have
that
my
could go
house for
unnoticed.
$1,000.
I mean, there's no way. I
Over the
mean-
weekend, we're going to the lake, you come stay at the beach.
We have to-
So you're hurting the honest person who reports that they rented out 1 night a week.
That's right.
And putting more on them as opposed, and you're not stopping the real problem. That was my only kind of point of that, of,
Well,
You know,
the smaller homes off the
that
beach
much
aren't the
of a
ones causing the problem.
right, so we're putting
So let them not,
a restriction on them being
Well,
able, and they're not a problem.
well, I don't think they're gonna.
So then we get back to
advertise-
parking.
Huh?
Then we can get back to parking. I mean, honestly, 1 car per bedroom. Come on, Sandy, I know you have something to say about that one.
The ordinance was.
That's pretty much what it is.
I think it is. It's 1 car per bedroom.
That's it.
Are there any,
that
are
what
there
they
any
were-
laws now with regard to parking in the state-owned slots
Right of
that they design?
The right of way? The highway right of way?
Yeah.
So there is a restriction, and it is, what, sun up to sundown, it's permit only, or whatever it is.
Well, so
You
on
mean along
Palm-
Palm?
Yeah, on
On
Palm
Palm,
Boulevard, it's
yeah.
public. So you could always have access to Palm Boulevard. Once you get behind Palm Boulevard, it's what Sandy's describing, where it's only the residents in that vicinity until the nighttime. Then after night, anybody could go into those rights of way. So,
But there's no restriction on Palm.
correct. Palm is always kind of wide open.
That's where the problem is anyway, so.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you. We're talking about all these short-term leases. I've heard some discussion about the state legislature taking charge of short-term leases across the state.
Well, there's a bill being considered that would keep cities from being able to regulate short-term rentals at all.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you
They'll
can't prohibit
financially
them.
be,
Right.
You can't prohibit them, but it
can
doesn't
cut
say you
back
can't
your beach
regulate it, does it?
reimbursement money.
Right.
It basically says you can't do it, but if you do it, you cannot collect the 6% tax rate,
Right.
and you're not entitled to the state.
no state
Yeah,
funding.
Basically
I'm
no
curious,
state
I've read
funding.
through it, but like I said, it says you can't, the city can't prohibit without. It doesn't say anything about setting regulations around short-term rentals.
Oh, I think you're right about the occupancy.
capping them.
Yes, I think you're right. You could regulate them, and I think we would be in a situation where I think we could potentially, if this, and I don't think, from what I hear, there's not an excellent chance of it happening anyway. But if it was to be enacted, I think we could regulate them, and I think we could establish a cap. If we established a cap and we met it, those properties that were prohibited from couldn't get a license, we would not be entitled to their additional assessment of 6%. They would be taxed as though they're a primary residence. So it would be a loss of revenue to the city.
So questions for the future for considering occupancy limits. Is it a problem? Are we fixing anything by minimizing it? The other part about the occupancy that we talked about when we were working on drafting a recommendation to council with Captions being considered was that the current grandfathered larger properties be reduced back to 12 if they discontinued their license for 1 year.
Yep.
And I am in favor of that. Lowering the occupancy back down to 12 when a property does lapse in its
I agree with
licensure.
that.
So that
For
number
a
is
year?
not based on number of bedrooms or size of the house, it's just at 12. That's
No,
it.
it's a number
I
of
think
bedrooms
Sandy
up
was
to
saying
12.
Up to 12.
Up to 12, if you can't prove that you were doing renovations or maintenance. I know siding and window projects can take 4 to 6 months
Or more.
or more. So
Yeah,
if you
but you
can't,
would still be able to get your license,
right,
and you would claim 0 or whatever number for income, you maintain your license. I mean, if you,
But
I mean,
you're
I
saying
guess
if
if
it
your
lapsed.
renovation happened to take more than the license year.
you could still get your license.
Oh,
Right,
so
I
you're saying as
actually-
long as you hold a license, you don't have to rent it, you just have to actually
I'm
hold.
saying it
if
lapses for a
lapses.
year.
I said
The
something
license
else, so-
lapses, yeah.
Yes.
but-
Then that property no longer has the grandfathered
Goes to,
number.
we would treat it as a new house that had
Right.
never had a license where it's a formula with a maximum of 12.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Everybody that kind of, will put that on the list as,
I mean, I agree with that.
I do.
Potentially, I think it should be based on, if you have a current license, you renew it. So if you ever lost your license because it got revoked, you would lose your
Right.
rights to go over that cap also.
so that's
That'd be a
that's
little
an-
bit different.
A separate requirement, that if you ever had your license revoked, you would also go back
To whatever the
To
count.
whatever the
Right.
new,
to like a new
maximum.
house.
however, it would need to be written to do that, so, but.
So Jeff, to answer your question, if I'm not mistaken, the current ruling is for everything after 2010 is that it's 2 people per bedroom plus 2 is the limit for a house. So you can build a 10-bedroom house, but you can only put 12 in that house. If you're getting a license for a 3-bedroom home, that's 6 plus 2, that 8 would be the maximum occupancy for that home.
Well, here's the problem, though, again, is this really gonna achieve what we're expecting, you know? We're limiting the advertised occupancy, but if somebody shows up with 20 people because there were 13 bedrooms advertised at a 12-person capacity, who's gonna regulate that? It's gonna take that blowout party, it's gonna take the disturbance, and so it's a stop point, it's a piece of insurance if that happens, but
Well, the property.
how are you gonna stop people in groups of 20, 25? They're gonna split up cost every which way they can if they're having a bachelor party or something. It doesn't matter if it's 12-person advertised capacity, if there's 13 bedrooms and that's advertised, that's what they're gonna look at.
Well, the property manager's responsible for that.
Well, that's what I think it goes back to, it'd be some reason they get called, they also get the violation for having over 12, which goes back against the owner as a violation, which could potentially lead to them losing their license in the future. So it's kind of goes back to an honor system, but again, it comes back to putting the onus on the owner that I don't think any of the property managers want to rent a house out to the group that's going to throw a big wild
No.
party.
Granted.
They can't help it that somebody just claims that they're a family and jumps in there. But I think it gets back to a lot of the properties that aren't necessarily highly regulated.
Yeah, well, then we have an argument on our hands, like, oh, well, they didn't tell us they brought 25 people. You
It
know,
doesn't
we
matter.
weren't sitting there
It
arguing.
leaves it on to the owner to be
Well,
responsible
what-
for ensuring
What
that.
happens, and the reality is the police show up, the police call the manager or the owner, and the manager or the owner says, get them out. And the police will assist in evicting them, and you get them out.
it ends up being a strike. And
Yeah.
to David's point, it's a strike against and gets them closer to revocation. I may be naive in this, but I do think that, in kind of our evolution of tightening rental requirements and establishing occupancy limits, and I think that's had a meaningful impact. I mean, I think that limiting the marketing and giving, if it's marketed for 12, I think kind of 9 times out of 10, it is 12 people. People are trying to adhere to the law, and I think they feel pressure to do that, and they're live in fear of, violating that. I think that it achieves, and not to say that enforcement is going to be easy or always perfect. It's not going to be, and we know that. But I do think that it helps. I mean, if overcrowding in units is the problem, I do think these regulations are helping that. There will always be bad apples that are going to.
Is
Well-
it having an effect on development or developers, property owners building smaller houses because of this? Are they still building 10-bedroom houses with the expectation to rent to 12 people?
They're 5-bedroom houses.
Yeah, it absolutely
Are they really
did.
doing that?
The
Yeah.
homes,
Yes.
Most of
the
them.
homes
Some
are
big
still
ones
large,
do.
but the bedrooms have diminished.
Yeah, it used to be, we got kind of dorm-looking plans that had a ton of bedrooms. You don't see that anymore. I mean, as Ron is saying, the houses can be whatever size they're going to be, 5,000 feet, but the number of bedrooms it's now fitting to the house because they know they can't. And it would raise a red flag. If there was a 7,000 square foot house
Well,
being
hey, if that's
submitted.
true, then I'm all for it, I just, it
And
kind of
homes-
fooled me with some of the size houses that I see go.
The homes are living better too. I mean, most of the 11-bedroom homes, because I might have done one or two.
You knew somebody.
I knew somebody who did. Were designed for bedrooms and not for living space. They were, large kitchens, but usually not large enough pantries to store all the food that you need to accommodate all those people. But that's a trend. I don't think that's maintaining. I mean, those homes are still out here and hopefully they're still filling up because they're big A homes that aren't gonna go anywhere yet. Maybe in a couple of years they'll be tear downs, but right now they're not. But quite the opposite. We're renovating a house, designing a renovation now of a former rental house, Front Beach, that's going to go to single-family occupancy. And that's been more the trend.
Well, I think it's more behavior modification. I mean, a family that shows up with 8 little kids and all the parents, they're not gonna be the problem.
Right. It's, and just this year, the house next door to me, which is not a very popular rental, rented twice for 1 and 2 nights. And one was probably, we perceived it to be a bachelorette party, and another was, maybe they were both bachelorette parties. And then, the house behind me was multi-bedroom house, rents better. They had young cheerleaders because they're all singing the same thing. And I swear they were there last year too, which also tends to happen. I had a buddy
Repeat guests.
who I used to be able to stay at his house 1 week a year. The house next door was one of those 13-bedroom homes. And the same group was there every year. And there were a supper club from Spartanburg that they just came to the beach to eat dinner together. And
Aw.
their group expanded, so then they had a rent house across the street. But not everybody, but I've also had a client who rented a house to a football player who was about to get drafted in the NFL. They were there for a long weekend. And I got called in the next Monday morning, Ron, can we fix these floors? There are cigarette burns all over the place. They weren't cigarettes. They had pictures of the bong on the dining room table, and roaches burning onto the wooden table, and just the amount of damage from that one event. And this is a house that's not on the beach. It was interior. That's why my concern always tends to be the interior homes that get beat up and abused and make the biggest fuss because they're in quieter neighborhoods. But I do have a thing about the number of nights. I know it could be detrimental to some people, but it does change in attitude.
Well, and I question this 12 even. I mean, it's even the fact that we can't really enforce 12, so if there's a house that gets called for being overpopulated, they're gonna have way more than 12. It's a lower number better. And my argument, I guess, on that is I can go back. We've got a pretty good sized family and they stay at our house a lot. But I've got 4 bedrooms, and the numbers of times in the past 5 years that I've had 10 people spend the night in my house, you probably count on one hand. And that's a lot different from a rental house that has 10 people in it, half the time that it's rented. So to me, and that's why when we were talking about before, I kind of recommended the eight number, because it is a residential area. I still feel like Palm is residential and should be residential, and the only way to stop these big parties would be go down. And again, if some family comes in with, 2 parents and 10 children, they're probably not gonna get caught. But that's not what our issue is from the families. It's when 3 or 4 families with all their kids get one big house, and of course, they're gonna be loud, and just like when my family comes into town and stays at my house, it's louder than when it's just our family there.
So the planning commission's recommendation on 8 was only, well, not only, but it was the back
The back part.
section of the
Yeah.
island. Would that, and I
It
don't,
was Zone 1, 2, and 3, which
Yeah,
were
background.
off the front
Yeah.
beach and not
any,
condominiums.
any
And that
interest
was
in?
my opinion. That was more, I was kind of saying, well, just take a hands off and let Palm go. But part of me says Palm's residential too should apply equally there. It's just historically, we've allowed that to go on for years.
So, do we want to put that on the list of things to consider?
I like it.
I like it. I think you bring it back.
I like
And
it.
again, not for the
But
enforceability.
is it
but-
everywhere? Do we want to add it?
That's kind of more my
Yeah.
question would be.
Just put it everywhere.
Yeah.
I'd start everywhere.
So
And is it
grandfather everything that exists
Is that how we would,
and tear out the.
Well, you're
Max
shaping,
of eight-
shaping the
Details,
future
Sandy,
development
details.
Yeah.
of the homes.
but is that what you are envisioning? A newly constructed house where now is 12 would go to 8?
Plus 2 kids. Yeah.
Yeah, kids
Tops of
What's
10.
our age limit
Two don't-
though? It's 2 years old.
2 don't count.
I mean, yeah.
Existing-
That's another option you could add in, that you're only counting, over the age of 16 or something.
10.
10, I don't, 12. Pick a number.
It's not the border.
10 can't drive.
So right now, under 2 don't count.
Oh, I'd put it
Is there-
higher than that.
Is there interest in lowering the occupancy but elevating the age that you don't count the occupants?
I think that would be a good approach.
I don't know, man. There's
How
some
do you
annoying
deal with
kids
the
that
condos?
Well, yeah.
like screaming in the pool.
Well, the condos are 4 anyway.
Hmm?
Right?
What?
Like the condos are 4, well, I guess, I'm thinking 1 bedroom, sorry.
That's a
Yeah,
good
no,
point,
I'm
'cause you don't
thinking,
want
yeah,
20
I'm
kids in the
looking,
pool.
I'm looking at some of the there's some big condos down in Wild Dunes. Nothing over here, but there's some condos in Wild Dunes that have 5 bedrooms,
Ocean Point?
Point.
They that
Any
big?
of the penthouses up there?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, why don't we start at single-family residence and let that simmer for a while?
So,
Are we-
single-family residence in my mind is 4%ers, and there are people that live in their condos that are 4%ers.
Single family in my mind is anything outside of the condominium.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how I envision.
If that's what we.
Rental, not
come
rental,
down to,
6%.
I'm okay with that.
So I do want to, I would say that we've been over an hour on this. And we have other things.
You want to get
and
to
not
that RFP, huh?
Yeah, not that, but maybe 5-10 more minutes and then we'll move on.
Can we strike the BOZA requirement?
Everybody
completely?
okay with that?
Yes.
You
Okay.
you should be able to strike that if you limit the occupancy.
I mean, I kind of
Well,
look at it
doesn't
as
wanna deal with it.
they're not going to disapprove
What
any
else
of them,
would
so
they do?
why
There you
bother go?
That's right.
Yeah,
Go
the
through it.
challenge again
I
would be
mean-
to give them some condition in the code that would allow them to deny one. And that's where I don't know what that condition would be. I can't think of a fair,
Right, I mean, even if all the neighbors came in and said, please don't
we
do
don't
this.
want this, unless there's a
Well, that
condition
would-
that would,
That
That-
actually makes sense, though.
And that's
What
what
makes
would
sense?
happen. I mean, I
Yeah.
was involved in a neighbor trying to get a home occupation and business license to be a builder. This was 20-some odd years ago. And most of the street came out to object, and he did not get his short-term business license that night.
didn't
But
get
I-
his home occupation.
That's what I meant, yeah. And I think that was a rarity.
It is,
but,
yeah.
um,
Yeah, home occupations have kind of 8 different criteria. If they meet all 8 criteria, the board pretty much rubber stamps it. So that would be the challenge, creating those criteria that provided.
That
a
we wouldn't do
meaningful-
through an ordinance,
Say again?
that we wouldn't just do through an ordinance overall.
Right,
Yeah.
you could just create an ordinance that establishes those same criteria that would apply across the board. And
Like
then
the-
that gets, vetted by the staff instead of the board. I like the idea, not that I'm pushing back on the idea of striking it. I personally like it just from sheer kind of workload and management of that.
No, I think if we're adding some of these requirements, as a part of the application process. If a applicant meets these requirements, then that negates the need for
The need
this
for it. We will
proposal
review
process.
whatever criteria
There you go.
at the staff level and not create a new meeting for it. All right, sounds like we have consensus to do that, so we'll strike that. Just to circle back for 1 minute, we're saying the 8 occupants for, I think what I heard come out of the group, any newly constructed house would be limited, instead of 12, it would be limited to 8. Anything pre-existing the date of this change would be grandfathered at its previous occupancy, right? Is
As
that
long
what
as
we're
they
talking-
maintain their license.
As long as they maintain, yep.
Yeah, and then I have just to kind of go through it, if it discontinues for a year, they would come in at 8.
I think if
We
it
had
lapsed-
12 when we talked about that one initially, but are we now saying they would come back in at 8?
Yes.
I think it'd be easier just to regulate, it would be 8.
Didn't we
If
say
they
it
let it
license
lapse.
lapsed, Sandy?
Lots
So-
per year.
We excluded Ocean and Palm Boulevard.
In our-
because
in
those
the
are
prior 8.
historically where the larger homes are. There are others, or exceptions, of course. I would have a problem, I think, with lowering it to 8 on some of those homes, because historically they have been
Right,
12,
with the bigger homes.
yes.
I tell you what, at this point, we're just kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall, so I'll leave that, I'll write that as best I can, and we'll
Yep.
continue to. 3-night minimum stay, if revoked, I wrote down goes back to 12, but I guess we'll consider 12,
Whatever the new,
whatever the new, strike the BOZA requirement. Any last thoughts on, I'm gonna circle back with a compliance company on whether or not
License.
the license number would help them, report that back.
Parking.
Yeah, I want to get to Suzanne, you mentioned,
But I was corrected.
you want to take that more than, basically, some consideration for requiring a property, requiring it to be professionally managed. I had, that you indicated more than 1,000 miles away.
That was off the top of my head. I was just.
We're
if
gonna
somebody
leave that
can't
off.
get rid of-
You think
Right.
on that, if you
No,
want to
but-
bring it back up,
I
we'll.
think your current requirement of somebody responding within an hour in the current license law is more than adequate, honestly. And we have not, that I have heard from the chief or any of the other code enforcement folks, had a problem with it.
Yeah, I don't know of it not being,
Adhered to.
yeah, adhered to you. So Suzanne, you want to strike that from the
I'll
list?
strike that.
Okay. Think on that if you want to put it back. So I don't think I have much guidance on ideas to incentivize carpooling. Anybody?
That's-
Marty, traffic engineer, you know how to do this.
This one's going nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
Gondola.
Well,
Gondola.
Gondola.
So, you
No.
know, there were, that unpopular rental house next to me several years ago had a high school, maybe a junior high baseball team stay there. And they came in a bus. And boy, did the people on the street complain. They're busing people here. So there's the optics of that too. There's no wind. I mean, there was not a car parked, maybe the coach's car was parked in the driveway.
Yeah. Bus
But
is even worse.
The bus is even worse.
Carpooling,
Yeah. So maybe if you have to
yeah.
get a limo, the black limo from Charleston.
that might be worse.
And then you're for sure assuming they're here to party.
Yeah. All right.
so how does it read again?
Yeah,
What
I
is
can't
the,
think of any better way than what we already
Basically,
have.
one vehicle per bedroom,
You know,
I
they're
think.
supposed to provide a number of parking.
Do you want to get, so again, this is written in a way, incentivized. Do we want to look at this issue of, we have a limit on the site, when that limit, when it becomes effective, basically the owners have the option, the owners of those cars have the option of gaining compliance by just shifting them out into the road? To me, I don't know if there's,
There's no
we
way.
just leave
that-
it?
With the states right away, the way it's set up and the state regulations, you can't stop people
Yeah.
from bringing multiple cars and parking on the right of way.
No, I think that's true. I think if,
So I think trying to limit them in the house absolutely pushes them out to the right of way, which I
think is
personally
even worse.
is worse.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only, I think that right now, our residential parking areas have a time that allows you to go out into the right of way. Just thinking of things we could do, if that was to be eliminated so that you really couldn't ever, if you're a non-resident, go out into the right of way, that would have the effect of keeping them on the site. So it would almost be the inverse of what's being talked about here, and keeping them more on the site, which maybe that's more objectionable, to have all 8 cars solely housed on the property, or maybe, I don't know which is worse.
8 cars is an 8-bedroom house.
yeah.
Well, I mean, you get 8 people and they all drive their own car.
I don't think you can.
There are limits, though. We have limits on.
Well, no, we just say that they have to provide parking for, 4, if we're using the number of, 8, 4-bedroom house. But if you have 8 people show up all driving their own car,
Doesn't our ordinance say a
It's
4-bedroom
covered.
house is 4 cars?
Yeah, we're
8?
covered for that.
So here, that section is on the screen now.
I mean, the problem
It's
is
one
that
per-
some of these houses are
One
narrow
per
and
room?
there's
One per
small
room.
parking areas.
Or one for every 2.5
But the
people.
bigger bedroom houses.
Say that
generally
again.
have bigger property.
Or one per every 2.5 people allowed under the occupancy. So it's,
So
I think
yeah,
that
it's
pretty
fine.
much gets back to one per
Yeah.
bedroom.
I think it's
Problem is the
good.
daytime when you have, you're renting 1, 2, 3 up Yump Street, and you have your brother and sister and his family come over to the beach to visit with you, do lunch, you do dinner, then they pack up and they go home. But in the meantime, there's, 8 cars at the 4-bedroom house, but they're gone that night, most cases.
So what about that? The idea that
As long as they're not in the
we're
grass.
only regulating between 11 PM and 9 AM. Is that appropriate? Or should we, because you could have any number all during the day.
Well, they can just put those temporary tags on there if there's more, right? Aren't those
Put them out in
distributed?
the right of way
Yeah.
overnight.
I think that's a daytime thing, isn't it?
Again, you're still pushing them
Yes,
to
you're
the
right.
right of ways.
yeah, I guess that's the question. Is it better to have them on the property or have them on the right of way? I'm not sure which one we're trying to.
Yes, so do you almost, or I guess the other option would be take this limit out so you're never pushing anybody to the right of way. Eliminate it altogether and say, put all your cars on your property all day.
So they'll
I think that would be
restripe, they'll restripe the connector if we take away the right of ways.
I think it still gives the law enforcement something to back up if there is a big party or there's something that's out of control. They can go, if the owner's not reachable or for some reason, and hey, they've got 10 cars in the front lawn, then they have a just cause to break the party up.
I do know that our livability officer did write a ticket for this fairly recently. I was surprised to hear that. I think it was in your neighborhood.
Well, I was just going
couple-
to mention that
Couple
there's-
weeks ago.
There's a property that is not on the rental market. I don't know if they're car salesmen or not, but there are like 3 Range Rovers and 2 Mercedes. And they don't all fit in the driveway, and they've paved the right-of-way for off-street parking, which is also a concern that maybe the city ought to look into, the people taking advantage of that. But they're, whether they should be parking there, they're the residents, so I guess they're allowed there, but are they?
They're the that's residents.
Yeah, it's a family.
Mhm.
Who needs all those cars?
All right, do we want to just
Yeah, well, that many
leave
people.
a generic bullet on the list for parking? Give that some more
Yeah.
thought?
Yeah, I thought you.
We're not gonna
Marty
solve
brought out a good point that, the way it's written now, it does at least give an indication that if you see more cars, then.
And I
occupancy.
think at night, the code enforcement folks are kind of keeping an eye on it. They've got their list and they know the numbers. They drive around with it.
All right, I think we have a pretty good.
Don't eliminate it.
Don't eliminate it from consideration. Oh,
Right.
oh, don't eliminate
Don't
the.
change
Right,
how it
don't-
is.
no.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
change.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's working.
All right.
When I first read that, just real quick, my thought was, how can we limit traffic? And I don't think that's the problem. I don't believe it's the folks in these properties at that level that we have the traffic issues with.
Just on Saturday.
Because they have places to.
Well, and Saturday, okay, and so, yeah, you wanna fix that one? Then that end of the island can only check in on Sundays. This section can check in
I like
on
that.
Saturdays. Well, and we
I'm
did
just
that.
kidding.
Wild Dunes, we check in
They
all
get-
our people on Sundays. Nobody checks in on our properties on Saturdays because of a lot of
Yeah.
the logistics.
That's a good idea.
So, anyway, I thought it was for traffic purposes, not so much because
Not
cars
on
on
the
the property.
cars on the property.
Or cars on the right of way. And I really don't want to push them. to the
Any,
right
any
of way.
other additions to the list? I think we've
Is this
beat it.
going to council before our next meeting, or are we looking
No,
at
no,
this
no.
again?
We'll work on this.
Okay, because I have an
Several
idea,
meetings.
but this has drawn on for so long,
Yeah.
I hesitate to even mention it. If I can bring it up next meeting, I think that's probably better.
We got a lot to think about before next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, better write
I'll
it
hold
down.
my tongue then.
No.
I'll table it.
Well, our next meeting is only a few days because I scheduled this meeting at 4 different times, so we're pretty much,
It'll be fresh on my brain.
This was formerly the April 19th meeting?
yes.
Wow.
All right. We ready to move on?
What, there's more?
There's
Mm-hmm.
more.
All right,
So-
next one's gonna be fairly quick, other than, just reporting that we received 2 responses to the sea level, rise adaptation plan request for proposals. Generally, how this has been handled and how I would propose we handle it again, we've called those respondents in before this group, had for this group, basically a presentation and given every member a scorecard on kind of what they felt like, how they felt like the responders did and would complete the project. That scorecard is then used to choose the preferred responder. Everybody okay with that? Any issues with handling that again? Handling it that way? And if not, would everybody be okay? And I haven't reached out to the responders yet, but would the group be okay with doing that at your May 10th meeting at 4:30? Or would you rather set aside a special meeting for that? Do it either way. I think you've done it both ways.
You said it's at the regular time, 4:30
Yeah.
on the 10th?
10th at 4:30. You want to do it that way, or you want to hold a special meeting?
Is there anything, I've read through numbers, are they giving quotes for their
No,
services?
and engineering work is a little bit different in that the way the state law kind of requires that be done is independent of price. So you choose the respondent you feel like is best qualified. It then is left to negotiate with that respondent to see if you can come to an agreeable fee. If not, if you can't negotiate an agreeable fee, then you would go to the next highest responder and try to negotiate with them. So that's established by state law as to how you're supposed to do that.
I mean, I read through these things, and I thought they were fascinating. One's twice as long as the other, to add more paper.
Both of them? Oh,
So they almost said the same thing.
So
So the 10th works for me.
10th at 4:30, it'll lead to one very long meeting.
Yeah.
Not that
We're
Amy minds
used to
a
it.
super long meeting.
Bring a book.
Or you can have 2 shorter meetings. Any preference?
I don't actually care. I'll do whatever the group wants to do.
May 10th works for me because I'm out of town the week before.
Because I'm
the
out of
week
town.
after.
Okay.
Uh,
It might be good enough reason to do it in one long meeting, if everybody's agreeable.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'll get the two respondents set up to come May 10th.
I'll cancel my root canal and be here.
You might want to have that right before.
Yeah,
Before you leave town, you want to do that, right?
that's all I have on
Um,
that issue, unless somebody's got any question on that. If we're ready, next thing is comprehensive plan review. Since our last, so our draft was getting very much marked up, redlined. It was hard to see kind of from version to version what was new and what was old. So we took away everything that you all had previously written and made and basically shown it as part of the plan. And what's been changed since your last review and this review is highlighted. Primarily, those edits came from Suzanne. Matt and I also did some minor editing. And I guess, and I think we still have some work to do on grant funding lists. There's the need to kind of associate projects and the priority investment element with a funding source. We're still working on that. Might be some census stuff. I think we're good on that.
Probably has to be cleaned up a little bit.
So we're still kind of doing cleanup. We did get some comments starting to get comments from residents, so we'll continue to clean. But anything that anybody wants to talk about, you can continue to send comments or say comments here, and we'll.
Yeah, real quick, I made some quick notes. There's several, it seems, redundancies, and yet, with regards to sewer and septic. On
Common
different-
themes that get repeated.
Yeah, and and if I could indulge real quick, I should have sent these to you the other day. I ran through this thing a couple times and then several things jumped out at me. Is it page 27? Improve water quality of the ocean, waterway, creeks, surrounding islands. Strategy 1 on part testing of the ocean waters. Work with Isle Palms Water and Sewer, convert septic to, yeah, so I was thinking one of the strategies under goal 3.2 needed to be, and it really isn't here specifically, work with the Isle of Palms Water and Sewer Company to encourage conversion from septic to sewer. I know that we've got some ordinances in places, and I also was thinking, well, why aren't we referencing those ordinances for how you have to change over when you're adding bathrooms and or demolishing and putting a new house on a lot? Is that the right place?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I am surprised that that's not in there, that it's not, and I'm wondering if it's in a different
It is.
strategy.
And so,
So that's,
39 and 40, page 39 and 40, I wrote a note to note that the sewer expansion is taking place. Ultimately, the planning commission concluded that the city needed to plan to expand the sewer system, but that it was cost prohibitive to do the entire project at one time. But it actually is in the
Yes.
works, isn't it? That's on page
Yes.
39, about midway down.
yes, yep, in the text there. Yes.
Why
there-
don't I hand you my notes and let you look through it, because I have more.
I'm
There's
thinking-
a couple of sewer things and drainage things I thought might need updating, and I just
So are
wrote
you,
what
so,
page
so
they're
I think that we have tried to choose the one element that it best fit in and only have it once in the plan.
Okay,
And because we've done it, we've actually kind of evolved, we've done it both ways where we put the same kind of 5 or 6 issues
understood.
in multiple elements, and I think we have decided that the cleanest way to do that, to avoid redundancy, is choose the element that it best fits in and get into it really once.
So
In that
some of the commentary that I note here, and I don't even know what this one is about. Oh, okay. Many homes on the island, at the bottom of page 50, many homes on the island are in septic system. And I just wrote here, add 5.2 about the sewer goal.
Okay,
So that would be the loop
that would be the
back,
place. Yes.
without listing out the whole thing. And there were a couple other places I noted some references that.
So wait,
we would-
Sandy,
we
so
just
goal
put-
5.2 is support the installation of sewer services where these services do not currently exist. And so what are you saying that we would add there?
Well, as just a note on page 50, and maybe it's not necessary, where you're talking about, however, some septic systems that predate health regulations do not meet the current requirements. The community facilities element of this plan includes information on the need to expand public sewer service on the island. And I guess I was referencing what that was. Where is the community facilities element of this plan? And that's what I was making a note of, C
Oh.
5.2.
So literally in the, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Literally there, direct you to the
Correct.
reference, okay.
It just mentions it, but it doesn't give you any
Gotcha.
reference, like, I
Gotcha.
read that, community facilities element of this plan, I was like, where the heck
Where
is
is
that?
that? Gotcha. Page 50.
I wanna give this.
Do you have
to
some others like
You
that?
can throw it away.
Those are great, I mean, that type of,
Just-
that level of detail of editing is
It's
perfect.
just kind of circling it around
Yep.
from one reference to the other. It's kind of cryptic, but I just sort of like page 27,
Yes.
Heights Sewer Septic, was their note. 28, oh, that was the traffic one, encourage golf carts and licensure. And I believe that's 8.1.8 on page 63.
Gotcha. So where an issue is referenced in multiple elements,
Go to
point
the-
back
go the-
to that so you can,
Yes.
gotcha.
Cross-reference.
That's a good,
The goal and the strategy.
You get
That's
the blue
great.
ribbon for
Yeah.
your
Oh,
review,
yeah.
sir.
this is most useful. Very good.
That's good work.
So we'll continue this. I think we're close. Maybe
I'm
Sandy's done, got his comments. Suzanne's taking a good whack at it. I don't know if Elizabeth has some
She had some
good comments,
too.
so I think,
Some of them are similar. We must do something about a world-class resort.
yeah.
I did say that.
And so did she.
Oh, yeah, I commented on that. Well, we.
Is it a
checked
world-class resort?
No,
What
Is
about
there-
the
is that a
world-class
defined
tourist
term?
facility?
I think you have to.
Because that's
define
mentioned
it.
somewhere else.
Slash parking
Which
lot.
means
I thought
they don't
we
even
took
call
that out.
themselves world-class.
Yeah.
They do not?
They do not. I cross-referenced
Who's
that on the
the,
website.
you're the tourism expert, Sandy. Can they say they are a world-class resort?
Sure they can,
Can say
They-
whatever
but
they
they
want.
don't.
Whatever they want.
but I don't know that they do.
They don't.
So when do you want to
Maybe
have
if
this polished
W
up?
wasn't capitalized.
I
mean,
would
I
get
think-
rid of it all. The whole
Well, that's what
world-class.
she had a good suggestion.
The
What did
term
she
world
call
First class.
it? Yeah,
Okay,
We had 2 requests for proposals?
yes,
Or 2 responses to that?
yes.
Where am I,
Where are they?
why am I can't seem to find the second one.
Go to the city's website
Right.
and next to the agenda,
I
think
have
I'm-
one. Mhm.
there should be 2. As,
Are they pulling up the same? It's probably me.
does anybody want, you want like I can't send it because it's too big?
Want to print it? I'll just grab it.
Do you want, does anybody want a hard copy? Okay.
So that was the second one. That.
You see it? You
Yes.
got it? Okay.
My computer's a little slow right now. So
All
I
right,
had a
so
couple
I
of
think,
small comments, I'll send them to you tomorrow.
yeah, send
Maybe
those
tonight.
and maybe next month we could, well, next month, 10
2
days from
weeks.
now, we can see how close we are to making a recommendation. And it'll continue, it'll get more eyes on it. You all will pass it on. It'll continue to get refined by council and get input on it. So it'll continue to evolve until it's done, polished.
Picking at Elizabeth's commentary, that we're only 4.5 miles of shoreline. We're 7 miles, and it is all
beach.
public.
Yeah, it is all public. The beach is public.
Yeah. Yeah, now the access may be limited to access points along a 4.5 mile stretch, but the other 2.5 miles are public beach for a total of 7. Just, it's, on mine, it's the Parks and Recreation section.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't,
And I thought about that too, because you can walk on the beach. I've done it many a time.
Unless a
And I
dog
didn't check
bites
every
you,
day.
or chases you.
you run faster.
Run faster.
All right. We'll we'll work through all the comments, incorporate them, and get them back to you for the next meeting. That's all I have.
So we will have 2 vendors here next meeting.
Yes.
How long do the presentations typically last?
Typically, we say 15, 20 minutes. Is that,
Oh, that's fair. That's nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
it's good?
Well,
There's-
previously, we had more, and so we
Yeah.
kind of really
Yeah,
kept
and-
them to
and I
a
will say
20-minute
we-
presentation. We talked for 10.
Yeah,
The next
they
guy
kind of,
came.
they do 15, 20, you will ask questions. So maybe it ends up taking 30 per responder. I'll say
Yeah, we
both, the
kinda-
city has history with both vendors and an excellent experience with both, so excited to have had them both give proposals.
Move to adjourn?
Second?
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Don't get too excited.
And our next meeting is
The 10.
10.
May 10th, if I can get it noticed.